Does CM Punk still have backstage heat in WWE? But first, is this a sign of a CM Punk AEW return? During his time in All Elite Wrestling, CM Punk would find himself teaming with real-life friends Dax Harwood and Cash Wheeler, with the trio working under the collective name of CMFTR. Despite the Second City Saints' recent departure from AEW, it appears that there may be some kind of plans for the three men to work together going forward, as earlier this week, Harwood would file to trademark the term CMFTR for use in entertainment in the nature of wrestling contests, as well as a bunch of other in-ring related endeavors. The application was filed for on October 5th by known wrestling-related trademark attorney Michael Dawkins, this on behalf of owner David Harwood, the real name of Dax. Due to the timing of the application, this being after CM Punk was terminated from his AEW contract with Cause in August, whilst FTR are still under contract with AEW, it's led to many to wonder if Punk, Harwood and Wheeler have plans going forward, potentially inside a wrestling ring. So what exactly does this trademark filing mean, and what could it lead to in the future? As mentioned, one thing that's interesting is the timing of the application, with FTR currently heading into an AEW World Tag Team title defense against the Young Bucks, who Punk has a storied history with in the past. It could be a case of the top guys perhaps being in need of some backup during their feud were other members of the Elite to get involved, although that could be a stretch to say the least. With that said, there are people out there that still feel this whole CM Punk situation is a work by AEW, and if it is, it's something that would make the late Brian Pillman extremely proud. One question you could raise is, why is Dax Harwood filing the trademark if it's AEW related and not the company themselves? Well, it's worth remembering that many AEW talents own their own trademarks, so it wouldn't be anything out of the ordinary, with one example being that Dax also owns the name FTR. Another possibility is that FTR are on their way out of AEW to follow whatever path CM Punk takes next, which could be why a tag team match has been set up in order to drop the belts and leave, although any bad feeling they may have had over AEW firing their friend likely would have been alleviated by the signing of Adam Copeland, who they are also close with. It could be the case that FTR will be working independent dates with CM Punk whilst under contract with AEW under the name of CMFTR, or in Japan or Mexico. Maybe the trio just plan on releasing merchandise at some point going forward, although I should reiterate that the trademark is specific to wrestling contests and live appearances, meaning it's something inside an arena, with there being no mention of clothing or merch in the filing. With that said, we're all in the dark over what this could lead to, with it opening up a ton of questions going forward, especially when you consider our final story of the video that we'll get to later on. But let me know what you think of this trademark filing in the comments down below. And next up, The Undertaker is set to go head-to-head with AEW. The dead man hasn't been seen on WWE television since this year's Raw 30th anniversary episode, where he was seen confronting LA Knight before giving his sign of approval to the late Bray Wyatt. According to a report from PW Insider from Friday, The Undertaker is expected to make his presence felt at the Performance Center next week, this during the same time that NXT will go head-to-head with AEW Dynamite on Tuesday night, leading to speculation on if we could see an appearance on the show. Next week's episode of NXT was already looking star-studded, with the likes of John Cena, Cody Rhodes, Paul Heyman, Asuka, and the Brawling Brutes all having been confirmed to appear from the main roster. Well, last night's episode of SmackDown would all but confirm that The Undertaker will be in the NXT arena on Tuesday after a commercial for the Black and Gold brand played during the show. At the end of the NXT promotional spot, The Undertaker's iconic gong would hit, hinting at his involvement in the upcoming episode. Whilst it's unclear who The Undertaker will be seen interacting with, it's clear that WWE is taking the head-to-head competition with AEW very seriously. This after Dynamite was moved to Tuesday nights next week due to a clash with TBS's coverage of the MLB playoffs on Wednesday night. What do you think of WWE booking The Undertaker up against AEW Dynamite, and who do you think he'll end up interacting with on the night? Let me know in the comments down below. Next up, a major AEW return return is on the cards. Kyle O'Reilly has been absent from the ring ever since June 2022 after having underwent neck fusion surgery later that year. Since then, fans have wondered when or if they'll see the former ROH World Champion back inside the ring, something we now have an update on from the man himself. Taking to Instagram this week, Kyle would discuss the complications with his surgery that led to a loss of movement in his right arm, this before discovering a device that would help him, and he would write, "I had my neck fused last September to fix some nerves that had gotten themselves compressed somehow. I'm sure a career of landing on my head for a living played a role, but sadly we'll never know. Regardless, I had been in pain and losing strength in my right arm for some time, and no amount of tape or denial could delay my surgery any longer. Unfortunately, I suffered from a rare post-surgical complication, and suddenly I couldn't move my arm at all. C5 palsy, the doctor said, and nerves take a long time to heal. So I was left to be patient and test my perseverance. Needless to say, it was disheartening to relearn activities like brushing my teeth and wiping my ass with my left hand." Kyle would then go on to detail on how this device helped him get back to the stage where he now feels an in-ring return is a reality, and he said, "The wrestling ring has felt like an oasis in the desert for me these last 12 months. I know if I keep walking, I'll eventually reach it, but I don't know if it'll just disappear when I get there like a mirage. I'm so parched, all I want is to get to the oasis and drink to quench my thirst, but I have to be careful or I'll trip in the sand or collapse from the heat. I guess that's why this is taking so long, patience and perseverance. The good news is, I can see the oasis now. It's definitely not a mirage." Next up, does CM Punk still have heat in WWE? Since his AEW termination in September, the future of CM Punk in the wrestling business has been a popular topic of discussion with fans, with them speculating on the possibility of a WWE return for the straight-edge superstar. Well, this is something we now have a major update on thanks to Fightful Select, and it appears that were the return to happen, it may not be as smooth sailing as some might have hoped. The belief within the company is that were the opportunity to present itself, Punk would sign with WWE, with this being something one higher-up is confident of. It's also thought that Punk has been open to the idea over the course of the past year, with it now very much being a WWE decision on whether it happens or not. Whilst we've just heard from Dave Meltzer in the Wrestling Observer newsletter that talks have taken place between Punk and WWE, Fightful would report that at least as of 2 weeks ago, this was not the case. With that said, there may have been movement since then. Fightful would add that one WWE employee recently spoke with somebody close to CM Punk, advising that the best course of action would be to speak to Vince McMahon directly in order to get his foot back in the door, although McMahon has been adamant in the past that he wasn't interested in such a move, this during Punk's time working on WWE Backstage for Fox, with the broadcaster pushing for an in-ring return at the time. Rebuilding a bridge with the WWE chairman may not be the only stumbling block, however, as Fightful would reiterate that there is still heat towards Punk from within the WWE locker rooms stemming from almost 10 years ago, and several talents would likely be consulted prior to any movements, this according to a top star on the roster. Another top star added that whilst there's heat, Triple H would be willing to take the risk, whilst recalling that it wouldn't be the first time that somebody's been brought back with baggage since he's been in control of creative. Fightful would specifically name both Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns as two people that apparently still have heat with Punk, or at least have been public about it in the past, with Reigns holding Punk responsible for some of the bad reactions that he received during his babyface run. This after comments that were made in the now infamous Colt Cabana interview. In addition to this, Roman did recently take to an interview about 3 years ago saying he's open to working with Punk with a creative right and if it was something that the fans wanted to see. Essentially, if it's good for business. Those Fightful spoke to in the creative team revealed that nobody has been briefed over a return and that any recent apparent hints at a CM Punk return were coincident and not planned that way. This in reference to the best in the world and the puppeteer lines from Seth Rollins over the past 2 weeks. With that in mind, however, Corey Graves would make a very obvious reference to CM Punk last night on Friday Night SmackDown when he stated that the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was making the world forget that he existed. This during a graphic for tonight's Seth Rollins vs Shinsuke Nakamura match at Fastlane. This is of course a reference to a line from an infamous CM Punk Ring of Honor promo that's also been referenced in AEW several times. Whilst Fightful sources have denied that past references were intentional, intentional. Sean Ross Sapp, the author of the report, would take to X to reveal that even he feels last night's Devil line was intentional. As for our final note from the report, the feeling within WWE is that CM Punk showed up backstage at the Chicago episode of Raw earlier this year prior to his AEW return with the intention of getting his job back. Based on how that experience went, this source isn't of the belief that it's on the cards, although let's remember that Punk was still employed by AEW at the time, which no doubt played a factor in Vince McMahon's decision to ask him to leave. It was also reported at the time that some fences were mended that night, with The Miz being one example, something that may help his cause going forward, but it looks very much up in the air at this point. And before you go, make sure you check out what's next for the WWE releases of September 2023.